In this age of gender confusion, it's difficult to find advice you can trust to help protect your child from those who would seek to unduly influence them, setting them up to be manipulated and exploited. On Unmasking the Trans Movement, we discuss, educate, and deliver the info parents want and need to help their children, grandchildren, and even themselves.
Welcome to Unmasking the Trans Movement. Now, here's your host, Brad Wilder.
And welcome to tonight's Unmasking the Trans Movement with John Euler. I'm your host, Brad Wilder. It's great to be back. John is all set up and standing by with none other than Tracy Shannon, a trans widow who is going to elaborate on a lot of different topics tonight along with John. There's so much to get to. We are going to start the program off in just a minute. It's all coming up right here on Unmasking the Trans Movement live right after this.
Join Unmasking the Trans Movement with John Euler as he hosts a free live Q&A every Sunday night at 9 p.m. Eastern on YouTube. We connect you with the clinical professionals and special broadcast guests who provide understanding on the many topics that make up this disturbing ideology and answer any questions you may have.
This week's special guest is Dan Kleiman with the World Library Association.
Protecting the most vulnerable, women and children. Unmasking the Trans Movement. For more info, please go to our website at unmaskingthetransmovement.com.
Welcome back to Unmasking the Trans Movement. On this Sunday evening, we are live. And we're live on YouTube. We're happy to be here. John Euler is standing by along with our special guest, Tracy Shannon. Let's bring them into the program right now. John, great to have you back. Tracy as well, good to have you here with us tonight. There's lots to get to, John. The news has been going rampant over the last week or two that there's been all kinds of things. As soon as that CAS report was released, we've seen lots of different things transpiring. I think the real truth is starting to get out as we kick off Pride Month. It's an interesting time to be alive, isn't it, John?
You know, who would have ever thought, Brad, we'd reach a point in our advanced civilized state that we would now see the potential erasure of women. That's really what's going on. And there's nobody better to talk about that than Tracy Shannon. Welcome back. You've been a guest multiple times, but this is the first on our live program. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
If anybody has been a trailblazer, you did not ask for it. It was foisted upon you by a very sexually deviant husband that was unfaithful. And you have you've spent years trying to put your life back together. Your kids are still feeling the results and effects of that. So you unfortunately you wear the title of trans widow. We had Uta Hagen on a couple of weeks ago. You two are very brave. You're speaking out, but you haven't just been focusing on the issue of the sexually deviant cross-dressing men that are porn-fueled that decide to come out as trans or AGP. Those are all silly labels, nonsensical. Really, the reality is you're dealing with men that are porn saturated. It's deviants that porn fueled that. But now things have expanded to a point where this is not just an attempt to cover for sexually deviant men, this woke movement, the LGBTQRS++. This has now grown to be an assault upon women. My contention is if women do not stand up and wake up and realize that, as the Democrat Party here in the U.S. is trying to now say that, you know, it's coming down to abortion. Well, what I say is this: okay, if the Democrat Party want to frame it like that, I guess women have a choice and to figure out which is more of an existential threat, abortion or men that will silence your voice and keep you barefoot, pregnant, and in a bondage dungeon. People need to think about that seriously. So, Tracy, you are now speaking out about those issues. Talk to us about your concerns. We have a number of video clips ready to roll because we're going to show how far-reaching and how important this election is for folks in the U.S. We have a number of people watching from all over the world. Western Europe is going through this. All Western countries are suffering from this, and deviant men are pushing, and the trans activists are pushing to literally silence women and relegate them to a subservient position, and it's extremely dangerous.
Right. Here in Texas, we had a case where a man was in the women's restroom in the Texas Capitol last year while women were there addressing the legislature and waiting for some legislation to be heard about female sports and also on the transitioning of children. And while during that time, one of the degenerate men was in the ladies' room, and one lady snapped a picture, shared it on Facebook. A friend of mine actually grabbed the picture from Facebook, shared it on Twitter, and as a result, she was stopped by the police and had her phone confiscated at the Capitol. She has still not got it back from the liberal Austin district attorney, and it's been a year, more than a year later. She did nothing wrong but share a picture of a man at the sink, fully clothed in women's clothing in the ladies' restroom in the Capitol. And just to illustrate that we have a problem. We have a problem that we cannot go into the restroom without these men in there, and they're obviously men, and they just don't belong there. No man should be going in there. No man should feel entitled to enter any woman's space or category. And we talked a lot about sports. I think that really does catch the attention of people on this issue, but it's more than sports. It's more than restrooms. There's so much more at stake here for women. Women do need to be speaking out about this. We need men to speak out in the defense of women about this, because this isn't just sports. It is not just restrooms. So it's also going to affect your free speech, your freedom of association, your freedom of religion, your ability to talk about your own female sex body in a way that makes sense, because we're losing our language. And so when someone says, we're facing female erasure, what does that look like? I think some people think we're exaggerating. Well, it looks like there's no female track team because their boys have started taking those spots. In Texas, we've protected female sports, but that we haven't done that everywhere. And the federal government is now coming against us, and all the states in that regard, trying to allow males to compete against females. But it's just so much more than that. Women-owned business. If you are a female engineer, for example, even in a state like Texas, all that's needed is a driver's license that says you're a female. And you can get the female-owned business certification, provided you do own more than a 50% stake in the business, or you do a couple with another female. So that all they're using for verification is a driver's license. Well, you can get that changed at one of these clinics they do at our universities in Texas. You can get that changed in just a few minutes because they have
Tracy, so that everybody's tracking with you, that term is called now self-ID.
So self-ID is a little bit different. They're saying like you just have to accept it. In Texas, you do have to get a court order for this, or you bring your birth certificate that's been changed. But to get your birth certificate changed, you need a court order. So, but it's very easy to do because you go to these clinics and you say, I identify as whatever, and they give you all the paperwork, and then you go to specific courts in Texas. So Travis County is one. Travis County is the easiest because they don't even do a background check. They don't even do a background check to find out if the person has a criminal history, is a sex offender, or anything like that. The law is if you're a sex offender, you've got to tell the sheriff in your county that you've just changed your name and your sex identifier. So you can change your sex identifier on your birth certificate, driver's license, state ID, and all other records in Texas. There's no law saying that permitting it. There's no law not permitting it. So we have to close the loophole and say that documents need to say male or female, and that it needs to be consistent with your biological sex as determined at or near birth, or according to your indigenous profile. So they're able to access, for example, award categories. So in certain fields where there's male-dominated fields, and a woman, for example, maybe in the power industry would get an award, but now a man who just identifies as a woman and who the state has come to agreement that that is a woman by issuing the license or birth certificate. And they're just, it's pure lies, and it causes disorder. It hurts women. And you're going to have all these men who are getting certifications, awards, set-asides for things that should be women. It should be for women. It's same with the federal government. If you're getting federal money for a shelter, even in Texas, the shelter has to follow the federal law. So we've got to push back on these federal laws that, that house men with women in places like women's shelters and prisons. In fact, in my county, Harris County, Texas, the liberal sheriff, not this current one, but it's still this way in Harris County, but the sheriff before him put in place even more radical language for their gender policy. So if a woman comes in and she needs to be cavity searched, for example, and she requests a female to do that cavity search, she could be examined by a man who identifies as a woman, because that gender identity is prioritized above sex in that instance in Harris County. And I don't know about other counties, but I think other counties will be equally as radical if it's in a place like Houston, Texas, where I'm from.
There you go. So people really need to let that sink in. That's just one example, but here you can be a woman. And when it comes to a cavity search, here comes this 6'2" cross-dressing male, and he gets to examine your cavity, so to speak. It's confusing kids. It is really a predator's playground now. And this will be a perfect opportunity to let me show what true leadership looks like on this issue.
Here, John, make sure we acknowledge some of the wonderful viewers that we have with us tonight. Remind them that they can get involved in the chat this evening and be part of the show. That's what we're here for. This is live, so by all means, if you have a question, John and Tracy are prepared to give you an answer tonight. Just fill it in the chat room, and we'll definitely have that conversation and get to your questions. So, John, you were saying you've got something you want to show everybody.
Let's look at Governor Sarah Huckabee Sanders, as she has said enough is enough. And this will show you that elections do matter. Arkansas, with the leadership of Sarah Huckabee Sanders, is saying enough to this.
Good afternoon, and thank you all
Did I do the volume? Can you all hear that, Brad? There we go.
for joining us. It's great to stand up here with some of the most influential and amazing women from across our state. We are all here to say, frankly, that we've had enough. Enough trying to erase women and girls, enough denying our biological differences from men, and enough of the craziness that is taking over our country. I've had the honor of being both the first woman and the first mother to serve as the governor of Arkansas. Before that, I was the first mother and only the third woman to serve as the White House press secretary. Because of that, I came into this role with a few pretty unique experiences. Among them is giving birth to 3 amazing kids. That experience underscored to me that a woman's perspective is important and fundamentally different from a man's. Nowadays, though, only conservatives seem to be making that point. On the left, women have taken a backseat to political correctness. It's why Senator Irving and Representative Barker had to pass the Fairness in Women's Sports Act to defend our girls across the state. They're using nonsense words to erase women and girls, and more importantly, to erase our voices and our experiences. Today, we're taking a stand against woke nonsense. What frankly started as a fad among a few grad students has seeped down into corporations, the healthcare industry, and increasingly state government. It's demeaning to women, and it needs to stop. In a moment, I'll sign an executive order banning a number of all sorts of ridiculous words from state government documents. Those include words like pregnant people, laboring person, birth giver, and several other nonsense terms that have cropped up in recent years. Some on the left will accuse us of being nitpicky, that Arkansas should just lay down and accept the cultural revolution without complaint. I say it's the exact opposite. It's the left that decided that woman is a dirty word. It's the left that decided we needed to toss out basic biology and basic grammar along with it. I think they're just mad that conservatives are starting to fight back, and they better get ready because we're just getting started. Thank you for being here, and thank you to the amazing women that are standing up here with me. I'll sign this executive order. We'll hear a few words from Dr. Chandler, and I'll be happy to take a few questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Tracy, your thoughts?
I mean, that's just excellent. And I need to see a whole lot more governors doing this, because women should not be referred to as, child havers, uterus havers, menstruators, pregnant people. We are more than the sum of our parts. We are more than the functions that our body can do. We can obviously do some pretty miraculous things, but that doesn't define who we are. And they're doing this erasure to try to not hurt the feelings of men. Quite frankly, sexually
deviant men. There we go. That's right.
That want to be, included in the category of female. So since they can't really do that, honestly, they think they can erase change the language and erase woman from the language. And our own White House, or not the Department of it came from like the government this week. I can't remember which part, but they actually put out a tweet this week. I retweeted it. It was saying that it referred to us as menstruators or people who have periods. So, they can't even say woman. It's obvious who has a period. Some women want to pretend to be something other than women, but they're still women. They know they are. They know they are whenever they're taking testosterone to try to pass as males. So there's a reason you're doing that. It's because you're a female and you don't look like a man. So you have to take testosterone so you can grow a beard and get a little more muscle tone than a woman would have. So, it's ridiculous, and we just need more of it. Come on, Governor Abbott. Texas women are waiting on you. Yeah.
And every governor in the states.
Every red state governor should have already done this. And this just proves that liberals, leftists, are not leading on protecting women and being about women. They have one thing that they champion that they say is pro-woman, and that's abortion. But that's not very favorable to the females that are in the womb. So they need to think about women and stop this erasure of women in the dishonest language that is being used everywhere. In fact, I noticed on a government document in Texas just recently, the document for putting your child on the immunization rolls, the record, it uses the word gender instead of sex. We can't be coming into agreement with this in our state government code.
Right. And Tracy, it's not just in the U.S. Here was a tweet right from today from Women Exist. I don't know who this group is or person, but we're going to look at, as a matter of fact, we'll look at this in just a second, the interview she's referencing. Okay, look at the Canadian definition of woman now. All people identify as women, whether they are cisgender, that's their fancy little psychobabble term for natural woman, okay, or transgender woman. You mean a male that is cross-dressing. And the only kind of guy that's going to cross-dress and come out publicly in order to gain access to women and children are porn-saturated men. Any guy that's going to cross-dress is accessing porn on a regular basis. Simple as that. If he wants to stay in a club, so be it. But when they bring it out of the club and into polite society, but you notice that that's not enough for them. Where are they going? They're going wherever kids are ultimately. But right now, since pornography creates a deep malevolence from men toward women, the men that are using this pornography, the men are toying with the women. And that's what people understand. They're not going to stop unless they are stopped. So the moment you accommodate with somebody, with a male who is deviant, you have just given him ground and he's going to take more. Just like Hitler, this is Lebensraum. They don't intend to stop. And this really is a matter of potentially life and death for women, because if women speak up, like Kelly Jane Keene, okay, here's her radical, I'm using that, tongue in cheek. Okay, this is really radical. She has done a number of speaking tours, and the title of her tour was Let Women Speak. Now, there's real radical. Right. And so they're holding these open air group talk. They're making presentations, and what should happen? A bunch of these cross-dressing women's underwear, deviant men, and their other Nazi-like counterparts. And sometimes they, will use these Nazi guys. I think it happened over in New Zealand. Here came the Nazis to try to make it appear like women who simply want to speak and say that we need an equal voice, that the women need an equal voice. It made it appear that they were Nazi-like. That was a stunt, and it worked very well. So people need to understand sexually deviant men do not like limits and boundaries. And that's what we're talking about, because ultimately the last protective barrier against sexually deviant men accessing kids are the women. That's what this is really all about. So it's an incremental erasure and silencing of women so that these guys can have direct hands-on access to kids. So that's why we have to stand up. We have to take this seriously. Tracy, any thoughts on that? Then we'll go to the discussion with Roseanne Barr and Tulsi Gabbard.
Well, these are men who just can't handle being told no. And women need to say no. And whenever somebody's using this silly language, referring to us with all these terms such as cisgenders, that's ridiculous. We're women.
And it's derogatory. It's derogatory and demeaning.
We are women, period. The real thing. The imitation, the cheap imitations out there, they can refer to themselves as something else, like men in disguise, something like that. But we all know there's cross-dressers. We all know about the sexually deviant men who want to mimic womanhood. So there's no need to include us in this game that's being played. Don't call us something else. We don't need to be redefined just because you have a perversion, a fetish of trying to mimic women through the use of hormones, makeup, hair extensions, etc. That's not what being a woman is. When I wake up in the morning, before I do my hair or my makeup, I am a woman. I couldn't tell you what it feels like because I haven't been anything else. I could never be anything else. I am a woman. It just is a matter of fact, a matter of being that I wake up that way. I truly was born this way. They aren't. They have a problem. They need to seek help, and it's not for women to be making them feel comfortable. They need to, frankly, just take a walk.
And Tracy, again, you had firsthand experience, and you lived. This is your lived experience long before they gained traction and the tactics to gain traction politically. And so you lived this incremental overreach, overtake, I don't know, right? However we want to call it, that little by little, it's very much what a cult leader or a manipulator does. Well, they're all manipulators. It's just incrementally, they're going to get the target of opportunity to give up their intuition. You lived with such a man, and the more you attempted to accommodate, the more you attempted to be nice, it wasn't enough and it progressed. Tracy, take a moment and talk about your experience and how deviant these guys are, because behind the scenes, there's a whole lot, there's another world. They are masters of illusion, masters at impression management. Alvin Louis was on last week. They are masters at playing upon and toying with and manipulating empathy. And before you know it, they have gained a whole lot of ground. It's very dangerous. And then anybody that tries to stop them are going to be in their crosshairs, and not in a good way.
Right. It's a PR movement mostly. Before this became really political and it became like a legal battlefield with legislation and lawfare, this was a PR battle between the trans movement and the rest of us. But with women taking the brunt of the abuse from it, so because they access our spaces. But as far as being how is it similar to what a woman who is living with a man like this, the boundary bashing, and saying that they actually act like they're, my ex would say he's doing something for me, that there's something, just like they're saying this is a human rights issue. It's kind of the same way. There's this dishonest representation of it. Well, this is a human rights movement. It's not. It's totally has a deleterious effect on women's rights and everybody else's rights. Their rights cannot coexist with all other people groups. And so, like in my marriage, if I didn't really come into agreement with it, but with the cross-dressing at all, but by tolerating some of the stuff that he wanted, the envelope would keep being pushed further and further. And that's what we're seeing happen. Like they're just pushing the envelope further, even without consulting women about how this will affect, how the things that they're doing, changing policy, whether it's in corporate, through colleges or other institutions or in the law, that they're, women aren't consulted about how that affects us, and they're taking it by stealth. They don't have to pass laws. Just like Texas is very much everything I experienced happened without passing protections for people who claim to be trans. So it's a fake thing. Nobody's born trans. So, but we have loopholes in the law. Like for example, how do they get their ID changed? Well, and their birth certificate changed, because there's no law in Texas saying, that it permits that. They do it because we have in our law a way to correct birth certificates that are that have a transposition error or a typo. So and you have to prove that's inaccurate. So that's how to prove it's inaccurate is not defined in our law. And we had to say in our law just simply that, what sex is and how it's determined. And because we don't, the trans movement has used that, and that has had a bad effect on women, because now we have females with men in their prisons. We have men in shelters with women. We have men in women's restrooms. We have kids enrolling in school because their parents take them to get their birth certificate changed. And now we have these kids who are socially transitioned with their birth certificate saying they're the opposite sex, and they're stealthily going and enrolling in school. This is going to cause a conflict down the line when somebody does realize that kid has been stealthily in there, a boy in female spaces all this time. So we have to shore up our language in the law. We can't be in agreement with or leave any, like if you give them an inch, they'll take a mile. That's what's happening. That's what this movement does. And it has a deleterious effect on everybody's rights, and especially those of women.
Unless people be confused as to the kind of guys that we're talking about. Now think about this. The entire female species is being relegated to worse than second class if left up to these guys. Women need to understand these guys are serious. Their minds are different now because they are deviant. Only deviant men are going to do this. And what is deviance? They are now inverted in terms of arousal and what they get off on. It's no longer even about lust. It is about inflicting trauma. And all they need to be successful is the likes of any kind of female who thinks these are normal, nice guys. Look at what Phil Illey, who refused to debate me, and he's blocked me on Twitter. Here's what he says about attraction to animals, right? What's it say? That sexual attraction to animals is also heavily stigmatized. Sorry. Yeah, Phil, I guess it should be stigmatized. So trans species identity. Now, what term is that? Only a deviant man. They play with language. They're going to make language up. They have their own little thesaurus, this cisgender this and natal whatever. Okay, so trans species identity faces obstacles to acceptance. Guess where they're on with this? Bestiality, which they're reframing. They're calling it zoophilia. Okay, yet even if stigma weren't an issue, where do wolf and dragon identities fit into society? This guy's written a book and it's being quoted, and all these deviant guys need is some useful idiot, whoever this female is. She's pretty noteworthy. She comes across, Exelancic, Sierra Weir. She comes across as though she's protective of vulnerable young women in the trans movement who got sucked in. Well, look at a Gen Spect conference. Look who shows up. Now look at the look on her face. Does she look awkward? Who do you think's holding this camera? She wanted a selfie. So what is this woman doing? Welcoming a guy. As a matter of fact, this woman has been extremely aggressive toward anybody that would say no guy who cross-dresses in women's underwear and drag to gain access to the spaces that women and minors are most likely to congregate. She's all over that. She will troll them. She will go after them aggressively. She turned my professional license in. She made allegations against me in my licensure. She claimed she was a client of mine. She never has been. So I believe that's perjury on an official document. They'll stop at nothing. So what drives people to do this? There's something going on. And we all need to be very serious about it. And as you just said, Tracy, and you lived it, right? These people do not care about the fallout. Your husband, your ex, right, did not care about the fallout on his own kids even.
No, and to answer your question, like, why would a woman like her do that? I think it's for male acceptance, pure and simple. A lot of women just want that male acceptance, even if it means they're having their empathy and kindness weaponized against them and other females. Like, she's not doing women any favor with, out there protecting men like that, if that's what she's doing, and attacking people who say, look, no man, the people who draw the hard line. This is an area where you draw a hard line. I'm from Texas. We talk about drawing a line in the sand in reference to the Alamo. This is where you draw the line in the sand. A man can never, ever be female. We should not go along with that, not even 1 inch. And the guy's an obvious pervert talking about trans species. I mean, this is total perverted nonsense that nobody should be. I mean, really, he's the one who should have his account deactivated, not us who are criticizing the perverts.
Okay. Brad, do we have some comments?
Oh, you have lots going on at this point, John.
Okay, since I can't.
I'm sure if you're following along and watching or not. Are you?
Say it again, sir.
Are you following along and watching the comments?
I'm
in the comments
not. I'm
section
actually paying attention to Tracy, so you're going to have to.
Well, I mean, you should probably be paying attention to that just as much as our guest, because it's important that this turns into a Q&A more so than just the two of you continuing to.
Okay. Well, you want to do us the favor? There you go.
Yeah,
well, do us the favor. Tell us what's been going on.
I don't know where to interrupt, and I don't know when to break in. So, I mean, these are things that we have to somehow get to the bottom of right now. Now, we've got an online big-time argument going on between Estella Havisham, who is obviously against everything that's going on here tonight.
Lancet. Really? Well, I should show people, we don't want to get diverted. But
no, of course not. But these are individuals who have questions, and I mean, we've got some great questions from a few different people. Like Deb Jurgens wanted to know some stuff. Danielle has some great questions as well. So, I mean,
let me
how you want to address this all is in your court, buddy.
Right. This is not a personal attack unless one of these individuals takes it to a new level, and this is illustrative. This illustrates what anybody who decides to stand up and say enough is enough We're not going to allow sexually deviant men. Everybody needs to understand that. That's who we're talking about, who in this day and age, 100% of them are porn saturated. That's why they think it no big deal to cross-dress in women's underwear and drag to go where? To the club. We're not talking about those kind of men. We're talking about the men that want to gain access to women and kids. All good people should be able to see the necessity of that. Tracy, your lived experience is that. So if you have somebody, a perp or perp apologist or predator apologist who wants to take a low bar approach towards safeguarding, yet still wants to say that they are for protecting vulnerable kids, is talking out of both sides of their mouth. And then if they get aggressive towards literally trying to shut somebody down, not just on social media, but go after their income, go after their professional license. Now you're dealing with somebody who evidences degrees of psychopathy. Okay, am I diagnosing her? Of course not, but you call a spade, so to speak. Tracy, you've been on the receiving end of these kind of people, and especially these guys, time and time again, that have gone after you.
Yeah, and men like that still message me on X and, want to convince me that they're just not like my ex. And, my ex had me convinced for many years that he was harmless, and I didn't even realize until I got some distance and clarity from that whole situation just how harmful the whole situation was. This is not helpful, to prop up these perverted men. It's just not helpful. It's definitely not going to help the women. It's not going to help because there's compromise built in, and we cannot compromise with this ideology at all. Where these men who want to present as women, where do you think they're going to use the restroom? What's on their ID? I know a lot of these men say, "Well, I acknowledge my biology." Well, la-di-da. How does that help me when you're trotting around in a dress, accessing female spaces? And how does this? We have to just end all the recognition of this BS in law and close up the loopholes, because we don't need these men who are perverts going out in public and including all of us in their fetish. I mean, just Google euphoria boner. Just Google it and see what you find out. We don't need to be making community with these perverted men.
And Brad, you told me to keep my eye on this. We'll settle this real fast and then we'll move on. Somebody is saying, Estella is saying, or somebody is saying that she never claimed, Axelancic or Sierra Ware never claimed to be a client. This is a direct email. She sent this to me on the bottom. See the bottom half of this? It's posted on my Twitter page down here. Dear John Euler, LPC, please send me all my, this was unsolicited, by the way. Please send me all records you have pertaining to our client private communication. I've never communicated with her privately in my life. And any and all consultation services you've provided me, Sarah, we've never once interacted. I've challenged you to debate. Anytime you want to come on, we'll have it. And all evaluations completed for me. Any diagnosis records, all my treatment records, all billing records in my name, and any other records that are in any way related to any LPC client relationship, including the time leading up to the signing of a formal agreement. I would love to see that, Sierra. Please present to me where you've ever been a client of mine. This is dangerous and delusional, but this is what they will go to. And she presented that as a complaint that to my formal licensing board, that John Euler withheld repeated requests for client information. Well, that's perjury. You submit that on a formal complaint. So these are the steps. This is the extent to which those that are these deviant men and those that are protecting them, Tracy, as you just said. And the question is this: what is it that is driving them? But we have to take it seriously. They are not going to stop. And Roseanne Barr just recently on her show had Tulsi Gabbard, and we're going to see that these women get it, and they're issuing an alert to other women.
most of all, they despise women's rights. I don't know why people can't see that that's what this is at the base of it, is to obliterate woman as a sex, as a protected class, and they're all like marching for it. It drives me crazy.
It's insane. It's literal insanity. And what they're doing is exactly that. They are trying to erase the word woman from the English language, from government documents and regulations. And
mother.
completely change the language. Mother.
Chest feeder is my favorite.
It's so bizarre, isn't it?
Like Title IX, he just signed that away. It's unbelievable.
The stroke of a pen undid over 50 years of progress for women and girls. And of course, bypassing our own democratic process of Congress. Like, if you want to go do that, take it to Congress and see if you can pass that legislation.
Right.
And wasn't the Democrat Party for women's rights at one time? I mean, it's as ugly as it can get.
Yeah.
It really, really is. And people don't want to see it because it's horrifying. But that's where it's at.
Yeah. And that's where, as you said, that's where I see, as bad as things are getting and have gotten, and as dark as the times may seem, I am hopeful, because even those who don't pay attention to politics, traditionally, people are like, I don't like politics, I don't want to get involved. Maybe they don't even vote. It's getting harder and harder to ignore when you have a little girl who's going to school and wants to compete on the swim team. And now you're confronted with this reality of, are there going to be boys in her locker room?
Well, the boys are all going to win,
ready.
so she can't have any dreams.
That's my
because,
point.
You know,
that's my point.
There we go. So I would say this: if anybody's in the chat room all worked up over my confronting a woman that is at best enabling a sexually deviant man who wears women's underwear, why does he do it? Porn saturated, and he's deviant. Where's your priorities? Why aren't you worked up over any woman that wants to essentially hold the door open for these deviant men? Why aren't you appalled that we have women that are basically predators and perpetrators and pre-arrested sex offenders, best useful idiots? They are going to eradicate women. And any woman that is not incensed by this, we have to wonder. It's surreal to me. Tracy?
Well, my message to any women who are enabling these men, who are marching for these men or defending these men, or even giving them a voice in this movement to push back, you are being used. You are being used. I can tell you firsthand, from firsthand experience, that you're being used and you're being played. These are very dishonest men who push boundaries, and they will use you for what they want. Nobody knows that better than a trans widow who's had firsthand experience with that. My ex used me to learn how to mimic womanhood, to learn how to look and act just like me. Would this be a good time to share the picture?
Let's do it. Let's do it.
There's a picture I shared online the other day. Look, they learn to mimic you. And this is it doesn't look like it's sharing it. Is it sharing? Yeah,
it is. Yes, it is.
So,
it's unbelievable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My ex, I used to think he was interested in what I had to say. He'd come into the bathroom while I was applying my makeup and stand behind me while I put on my makeup. He was using me. He was using that time while I thought he was interested in what I had to say and wanted to spend time with me, having discussions. He was just watching how I put on all my makeup so he could later do that. So look, that's just one example of how these deviant men are using women. And I see a lot of men trying to use women to get a compromise on this. And I also have seen, it looks like some of the professionals and some of the people are online. They want to slightly come into agreement with this. They want to say, well, there's people who truly are this alternate gender that they need to have a means, that to be protected, that they need to be recognized in our governmental code. And we do not need to be doing that. So any woman who is
they're not
doing
being
that,
targeted,
you're hurting women
in this day and age. They're not being targeted. These guys want to cross-dress. Who's targeting them? Stay in the gay bars. Just do your thing in there. around other guys, and so be it. It's when you come out into the public, and why are you doing that? Because you want to push boundaries and you want to access women. Ultimately, it's to access kids. It's to traumatize women and gain access to kids. It is
Right.
that simple. That's why they're not going to stop.
And I'm so tired of hearing that they just want to pee. I also just want to pee. And if they need to pee, I think there's been a lot of advocacy. How about they advocate for men to accept them in their spaces while they're cross-dressed instead of trying to sashay into women's spaces where they do not belong? Because I think we all know about these men. The reason they don't want to be in the men's spaces because men know exactly what these men are about. And that's why they're afraid to go in there. We cannot compromise our safety and privacy for women so that some men who don't want to be around other men, are coming into our space. We don't know which ones are safe. We just know they're men. And by that fact alone, they just don't belong, whether they're safe or not. I mean, my husband, I think, is a very safe man who would never harm anyone. Should I be able to consent for him to go sashay into a woman's space? No, I shouldn't.
There you go. Tracy, I simply asked anybody this question. What do you think do you think he's wearing any underwear under there? How do you know? Right?
Probably wearing some like pink leopard panties, like she brag about.
And what do you think he was doing with his hands less than 24 hours ago? And what do you think he was doing them with as he was watching online? Now, if you doubt that, then you don't understand male deviance. Would that change her? Again, who do you think is taking this picture? Look at the look on her face. Yet she has no clue what this guy was accessing online less than 24 hours ago, does she? No. And why is he smiling? Because he's using her as a useful idiot. And that's not a pejorative term. We need to understand what these guys are like. I work with men who finally got arrested. How long do you think they had been doing what they'd been doing prior to arrest? I'm one of South Carolina's largest sex offender treatment providers. 100% of them were doing what they were doing for a long period of time before arrest. 100% of them were into pornography. So it is not safe for a woman or a kid to have a sexually deviant guy that is so deviant that he is so brazen wearing women's underwear and drag.
Right.
So Tracy,
And
why
everything
was your
goes
husband
safety
trying to
issue.
mimic you? What was his gender goal?
I mean, I caught him one time in the restroom shaving and he was in a state of arousal. So, I mean, the goal seemed to be, at least in the beginning of when I found out everything, there was a lot of arousal involved, a lot of sex talk with his new friend that he found online to share his fantasies with. So, I mean, the whole goal, it was very sexually driven that, what he was doing.
So more of the end goal rather than a gender goal.
So men who have this particular fetish, and a lot of them don't want to admit that's what it is, but they will initially be aroused by the cross-dressing, and then over time they don't get such a charge out of that anymore. They need something else, so that's when they start going out into public, and then they get a euphoric feeling from going out into public, getting into female spaces, and they think they pass because most women are too polite to say dude, so that's the next thing. If you kind of follow the pattern of autogynephilia, it doesn't always stay where they're aroused by dressing up, but they lose that sensation, just like the more deviant, like porn has a continuum where they want more deviant stuff. Well, this has a continuum where just putting on women's panties no longer turns them on. So now they need to access female spaces. Now they need to be a space invader, and that gives them the euphoria. And you'll see these men posting online about going in the women's restroom, how that gave them a euphoria boner. So I think that is the motivation for many of these men, and for these women who went to that conference that the picture is from. If you're shaking hands with a man like that, I hope you had some hand sanitizer.
All right, let's
no longer do these guys have to worry about falling out of trees as they've been peeping on the second floor. Okay, that's what women need to understand about these guys. That's what's going on. These guys no longer fear getting 5 to 10 years in prison because now you have people that are holding the door open for them, essentially. And now also on top of everything else, they are demanding their rights, quote unquote, their rights to do what? If they get arrested, now they want to go into female prisons. Why? Because it's safer? That's a joke. The safest person in a male prison, and I can speak firsthand to that, and if anybody wants to debate me, you first tell me if you've worked in a prison. I worked on site staff in the Pennsylvania Department for 11 years. The most catered to population are the quote unquote transgender inmates. I used to have that, and they're all in the mental health roster by nature. They have to be. And so I had virtually all of them on my caseload at both Crescent and at SCI Somerset. So I can speak to this definitively. And they're always arrested for prostitution. They're pimping themselves out or drugs, some drug related charges. Well, they get special attention. They get a single cell, which is a premium in prison, and they like the attention. They are not in danger. They're in danger of what? Being raped. What do you think they were doing out on the street? And it wasn't being raped. Okay. If you violently rape somebody in prison, you've added street charges to yourself. So these are guys that get a kick out of the attention, and they are the safest in a male prison. Why do they want to go to a female prison? Ken Herdman and he was a treatment specialist. We did an extensive interview about this. And there's only one reason these guys who are all a threat, 100% of a threat. I'll issue the challenge now for any state, federal, provincial, or prison system. You let me come in at your expense and review all the files of 100% of the guys that are in there. And I'll show you, if I have open access to all their records, I'll show you they are an eminent threat, every single one of them, to women. And Ted Cruz spoke to this issue. This is how serious it's getting. This was during a hearing for potential judicial nominees, federal judges, and listen to Ted Cruz from Texas, Senator Cruz, and listen to this inept, brain-dead response and a parroting response. That's all they can do, these leftists, as it were, with this issue. They have these little scripts that they follow, and they can't get off script unless they really show who they are.
Well, Judge Detburn, I want to continue on this line of questioning. In your court, what matters more? The rights of individuals or your political ideology?
I apply the law to the facts.
I asked the question, which matters more?
Well, my political ideology doesn't matter at all.
Okay, so I don't believe you. And I think this case demonstrates that you are willing to subjugate the rights of individuals to satisfy your political ideology. This case involves a male defendant who raped a 9-year-old boy. Was he guilty of that?
Yes, the petitioner pled guilty to that.
Okay, so he raped a 9-year-old boy. He also raped a 17-year-old girl. Was he guilty of that?
He pled guilty. The petitioner pled guilty to that crime as well.
So was he guilty?
I hope so, because she pled guilty to it.
He was a he when he did this.
That's correct.
And also criminal deviant conduct, which the record doesn't disclose what that was exactly. Then, after serving in prison, Mr. McLean was released for parole, but then violated the terms of parole by having internet and was sent back to prison. 1 year after being released again, he was convicted of having child pornography. Is that correct?
I'm unclear on exactly the time frame that you're at, but the petitioner was convicted of distributing child pornography.
Child pornography that was images of adults violently raping children.
Abhorrent conduct.
Okay.
For which there are real victims.
And this individual, 6'2", biologically a man. A minute ago, you said that when this man decided that he was a she, you said this individual was, quote, I wrote it down, sober and entirely a female. That phrase struck me as remarkable. Did this individual have male genitalia?
I think what I said, or at least what
that is a verbatim quote, entirely a female.
Sorry, what I meant to say was hormonally a female.
Okay, but that's not entirely. Did this individual have male genitalia?
Yes.
So you took a 6'2" serial rapist, serial child rapist with male genitalia, and he said, you know, I'd like to be in a women's prison. And your answer was, that sounds great to me. Let me ask you something. The other women in that prison, do they have any rights?
Is that a question you're
Yes,
asking me?
the other women in that prison, do they have any rights?
Of course.
Do they have the right not to have a 6'2" man who is a repeat serial rapist put in as their cellmate?
Senator Cruz, I considered the facts presented to me and I reached a decision.
I asked you a question. I asked you a question. Do they have a right not to have a 6'2" man who is a serial rapist put in as their cellmate? Do those women have a right to that?
Every person who's incarcerated has the right to be safe in their space.
But you didn't think so. You didn't think so. And in fact, I'm going to give some quotes from your order because Senator Kennedy is right. This is not a judge's order. This is a political activist. By the way, the beginning of your order says, at birth, people are typically assigned a gender. I got to say that would astonish a lot of Americans. A lot of Americans think you go to the hospital, a baby is born, and congratulations, you have a little boy, a little girl. The assigned a gender, I know you went to Brown, but it sounds like it's in a college faculty lounge with no bearing on reality. The Bureau of Prison argued what I'm saying right now, that if you put this person in a female prison, there will be a risk of sexual assault to the women. And you know what you did? You said you didn't care about the women. I'm going to quote what you wrote. You wrote, quote, the Bureau of Prisons claim penological interest in protecting female prisoners from sexual violence and trauma. This interest is legitimate. That's kind of you to say. But there are no signs that petitioner is at risk of reoffending. The record is devoid of evidence of incidents of violence or assault during petitioner's incarceration when she was the perpetrator, only the victim. A theoretical risk of sexual assault by the prisoner without more cannot support the BOP's position. No evidence, theoretical. Have you dealt, in what universe is someone who is a serial repeat child rapist not at a risk of reoffending?
Senator, as I do in every case.
Okay, I know you've been told to repeat the line, I follow the law. I asked a question. In what universe is someone who is a serial repeat child rapist not at risk of reoffending?
Sir, I looked at the facts that were before me in this case. All of the evidence, including the statements of every warden who had supervised this petitioner.
You also wrote, the BOP also posits that permitting petitioner to live among women will be traumatizing and possibly dangerous to them. This concern is overblown. I have to say, if I were the father of one of those women, and you decided that my daughter's cellmate was going to be a 6'2" man who over and over and over again committed violent sexual assault, I would say the entire justice system is absurd, and it is clear on your record, your political ideology matters a heck of a lot more than the rights of those women that you endangered. I think you're a radical, and I think you have no business being a judge.
Tracy, first of all, do you feel that you have been interrupted by me and these clips during our interview? Somebody
no.
just posted some person's running their mouth in the. Do you feel like I've had an agenda and you want to speak and I've interrupted you?
No, I'm glad you're sharing these clips because I haven't had time to really keep up with the news lately. I've had a lot going on in my personal life. I have a mother who's been ill and my father's been ill, so I've been caring for them. So it's great to get caught up on some of the news on this front. I mean, all I can say about this judge is what a disgusting woman, what a disappointment as a judge. Instead of having a confirmation hearing about this judge, they should be having an impeachment hearing, and Congress should take its job of impeach judges seriously, because this woman has behaved badly by doing that. We cannot wait for a woman to be raped to act to protect women. And that's the problem, because they want to say it's discriminatory to protect women. It's not. You just need to protect women and keep men out of female spaces. That's all there is to it, period. We can't wait to act until a woman's hurt. We're being told you cannot protect children. You cannot protect women until something happens to them. By then, it's too late. We need to maintain common sense and decency in this country. You don't do that by coming to an agreement, and even in a very small way, with this dangerous and dark ideology.
I noted that Senator Cruz spoke to some of the issues I raised, and somebody in the chat happened to say, "Oh, John doesn't have the background." Just for a moment, we'll help people see what is my background. We'll just take just a second here. If somebody wants to find out about my clinical background, I interview a fellow prison employee. Ken Herdman and I rode together. You can go on to my YouTube channel. We have part 1 and part 2 about females being placed at risk. I go in depth and about my background. Ken Herdman and I talk about that. And then if they want to see after I retired with full benefits, from 11 years of the Department of Corrections. So I retired, but that was also after I blew the whistle on inmate abuse. So I'm the first psychology staff. So if anybody wants to read about that story, you can go under Insights tab, and there is that story. So I just wanted to put that out there. Tracy, and you have been active in Texas. What do you have to say to other women, moms, women, wives, anyone about the need for women to really get involved, because these men are not going to stop. They're going after rape shelters, domestic violence shelters to force themselves in. They're getting funding cut along with the trans deceivers, where they want kids to be put on that moving sidewalk towards sterility and amputation of sex organs.
Well, women need to get involved. It's not too soon. Don't wait for it to affect your family. Don't wait for it to affect you personally or to affect your rights. We've got to be on the front lines defending this, because a long time ago, women could not, and this is not all about bathrooms, but we're going to talk about them again. A long time ago, only men had public accommodations as far as restrooms, because only men engaged in public life. It's not like that now. Women are engaged in public life. We have jobs. We are out in the community doing things more than ever before. But if we cannot be safe to use public accommodations such as restrooms, or to go to a gym and know that there's not going to be a man allowed in the women's locker room to get fully undressed in front of you or your daughter, then we cannot fully engage in public life like we have been. And that's where this is going. We cannot, we're going to be coerced with the language, as I already was when I was in court. That was many years ago. And we're seeing more of that. We're seeing people already, many years ago, even in some states in the United States, if you didn't use the right pronoun, then you could be fined or maybe even go to jail. So this is very serious, and it's not too soon to get involved. Get involved, because this is going to affect you. It's going to affect your children. This ideology is everywhere before it's even law. It's there. It's in there stealthily, like it is in Texas, and we have to take action to make sure that we shore up our code in our state so that we can protect women.
Brad, I have not been able to keep up with the questions, so I'll rely.
Okay.
Does anyone have any questions for Tracy?
Well, there were a few questions a while back. We kind of covered a lot of the stuff I think that people wanted to know about. A lot of people thanking Tracy for being here tonight, just for giving her perspective, for having a professional opinion on this as well. And, it's tough to get a trans widow's opinion. I mean, Uda's trying to present her side of things, and Tracy, it's good to hear you back up some of her stuff, and she backs up some of your stuff. So, it just goes to show you that the track that we're on is the right one, and we're not, deviating from our mission or our goal of making sure that we're educational on this program. And, we're not haters. We're actually just wanting to protect women and children. And that's first and foremost on John and my mind, and that's what it's been from the very get-go. Again, there's a lot of deviance to everything that's going on in this whole movement. We're running into Pride Month right now. I think that has a lot to be discussed as we go forward. I mean, there's been so much that's happened, like I said earlier in the program, over the past couple of weeks, with the Cass report coming out, with other individuals starting to see what Fred Deutsch has done out of South Dakota. And, seeing the movement there to stop some of this. We see a little bit more exposure as to, how they're coming for our children. And that as well as open the door for parents to step up, do the right thing, start to look elsewhere for information such as ours, where they can get educated, help themselves, and help their own kids and their families.
That's right. And we need to take action because people are not going to stop. These deviants are not going to stop. So on behalf of women and children, we have to take action. Somebody also posted that ATSA doesn't have me, that's the Association for the Treatment of Sexual Abusers. No, I'm very much a member.
So Tracy, anything you'd like to add before we wrap up tonight? Obviously, time is always an issue, and we're just running over our first hour here. So,
I would just say that the Senator Ted Cruz had mentioned in his questioning of or comments to the judge that he asked if the prisoner had male genitalia, and he also made the statement that he was still a he when he committed the crime of rape. Well, the prisoner is still a he, still a man. Nothing will ever change that. No amount of surgery or hormones will ever change that. So let's make sure that we keep our thinking clear on this issue. And it does not matter if this kind of deviant man has his genitalia changed, rerouted, reconstructed, removed, or whatever he's done. It's still a man. A man is a man. They just don't belong in women's spaces, period. And by the way, there's a case, I don't remember if it was in Texas or not, but I think it was, where a man raped a woman with a pencil. So, he was post-op, I think. So men who are deviant can hurt women, even if they don't have their genitalia as originally designed by the creator. So they're still dangerous. And even if they weren't dangerous, they don't belong in women's prisons. Let's just take a hard line on that, or any other women's spaces, period.
100%. John?
I would echo exactly what Tracy said.
Well, thank you both for being here tonight. We appreciate all of your time. Please keep up the good work, both of you. We look forward to next week's show as well. John, maybe you want to quickly jump in on who's going to be here next week to join us.
Well, we are going to be looking at the attempts to only legalize pedophilia, and we have an expert. We've had her on. I don't want to, she may have a new name. So we'll just kind of, as a teaser, her first name is Erin, and she is a consummate scholar. And we're going to go into what is going on within everything from deviant male sexologists to research by these men that's being used to try to normalize pedophilia. We've heard the term minor attracted persons, and that is being used to dumb things down and flip the script, generate sympathies toward these individuals, so that ultimately we're hearing the term now, mature minors. And so we will be looking at that. It used to be Erin Holmes, so if Erin is listening and I didn't get it right, then my apologies. But she's a consummate scholar, and we're going to be looking at the push toward legalizing and normalizing, destigmatizing, it's all the same thing, pedophilia.
And Dan Kleiman will be on in a couple of weeks from now as well with the World Library Association, yeah?
And then we'll have Tracy back.
Sounds great. Well, thank you again, both of you, for being here tonight. Tracy, always a pleasure. And John, have a great week ahead, and let's meet up next Sunday night with another great episode. Thank you, everybody, for watching. Until next time, I'm Brad Wilder on behalf of John Euler and Tracy Shannon. We look forward to seeing you again right here on Unmasking the Trans Movement. Till then, remember, it's not our kids' fight, it's our fight. We'll see you soon.